November 20, 1943, 623 hours, Red Beach 2, Betio Island, Tarawa Atoll. The shoreline erupted in a pattern the Japanese defenders had never encountered. Columns of sand shot skyward in a methodical sequence, each burst advancing steadily toward concealed positions with an almost mechanical regularity. Inside a palm log bunker, Japanese naval infantry observed through narrow firing slits as Marine First Lieutenant William Dean Hawkins advanced across the sand carrying a weapon that appeared unusually large. According to Japanese military doctrine, American soldiers were expected to depend on the sheer volume of rifle fire, their individual arms considered inferior to the moral and spiritual intensity of a bayonet assault. Hawkins, however, would soon prove that one Marine with a single, distinctive firearm could change the battlefield entirely within just 76 hours. Over 4,500 Japanese defenders on Tarawa would be killed. The weapon in question was the Browning Automatic Rifle, or BAR. It weighed 19 pounds when unloaded and could fire the .36 Springfield cartridge at two distinct rates, a moderate pace of 300-450 rounds per minute, or a rapid pace of 500-650 rounds per minute. Its 20-round magazine could be emptied in less than 3 seconds when set to full automatic. Within those 3 seconds, the Japanese soldiers would witness a fundamental failure in their tactical assumptions. The doctrines they had relied upon for decades, emphasizing bravery, spiritual fortitude, and hand-to-hand combat, were suddenly rendered obsolete by industrialized automatic fire. 20 minutes into Hawkins' advance, his accompanying scout sniper platoon had neutralized 3 Japanese fortified positions through concentrated automatic fire. The battle for Tarawa commenced with an immediate display of overwhelming firepower that contradicted all prior Japanese lessons on battlefield conduct. The Imperial Japanese Army entered the Pacific War armed with tactical strategies largely unchanged since victories in China and against Russia. Their infantry manual of 1909, still in effect in 1943, dedicated 17 pages to the role of spiritual courage and bayonet engagements, while automatic weapons were addressed in only a brief 2-paragraph section. Central to Japanese military thinking was the concept of sashin, the belief that spiritual strength could offset material or technological deficiencies. The Bushido Code reinforced this principle, asserting that an adequately motivated soldier could overcome any adversary through sheer will. This was not mere propaganda, it was institutionalized doctrine. At the Chiba Army Infantry School, training emphasized that 1 Japanese infantryman could match the combat effectiveness of 3 Chinese soldiers or 2 Russians purely through the application of spiritual superiority. On Tarawa, that belief collided violently with American industrialized warfare, where mass-produced firearms, coordinated tactics, and mechanized firepower demonstrated that valor alone was insufficient against the efficient lethality of automatic weapons. The confrontation on Red Beach 2 marked a stark illustration of the clash between a culture that glorified personal bravery and the mechanized industrial approach of an army designed to maximize killing efficiency. The implications would echo across countless Pacific islands in the campaigns that followed, as the lessons of Tarawa would be repeated in battle after battle. During World War II, Japanese forces were familiar with the concept of automatic firearms and had developed their own light machine guns, notably the Type 96 and Type 99. Over the course of the conflict, roughly 41,000 units of the Type 96 and 53,000 units of the Type 99 were manufactured. Despite these numbers, these weapons were rarely issued in large quantities. Typically, each company received only 2 or 3 light machine guns, which were treated as specialized support arms requiring trained operators. The idea of equipping every squad with multiple automatic rifles, prioritizing sustained firepower over individual bravery, was fundamentally alien to Japanese military doctrine, a conceptual gap that would have disastrous consequences on the battlefield. As Japanese troops advanced across Pacific Islands, they repeatedly encountered American squads whose firepower exceeded that of entire Japanese platoons. Central to this imbalance was the Browning Automatic Rifle, BAR, a weapon that symbolized a fundamental shift in infantry warfare. Designed by John Browning in 1917 and refined over the interwar period, the BAR was mass-produced at levels that the Japanese command could hardly imagine. Unlike the Japanese system, Where each Type 96 required careful hand-fitting by skilled craftsmen over several weeks, American industry churned out rifles in vast quantities, placing unprecedented firepower in the hands of ordinary infantrymen. By late 1943, American factories were producing BARs at rates that would have seemed impossible to Japanese planners. The New England Small Arms Corporation alone manufactured around 168,380 units during the war. IBM, previously recognized in Japan solely as a producer of business machinery, adapted its facilities to produce an additional 20,000 rifles. Marlin Rockwell and other manufacturers contributed to a total production approaching 350,000 BARs. The sheer scale of output underscored a decisive industrial advantage. The United States could equip its infantry with automatic weapons in numbers far exceeding the capabilities of the Japanese forces. The impact of this disparity was starkly evident in combat. Marine Sergeant John Basilone, awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions on Guadalcanal, demonstrated the lethal potential of American automatic weapons. In October 1942, he engaged a Japanese force of roughly 3,000 soldiers, employing both machine guns and BARs to halt repeated assaults. While the BAR's technical specifications were impressive, it fired the potent .36 cartridge at rates up to 650 rounds per minute with effective ranges surpassing 1,000 yards. The true revolutionary aspect lay in its deployment. By 1943, each Marine rifle squad was typically armed with 3 bars, ensuring that American infantry could deliver a volume of firepower that Japanese tactical planning could neither anticipate nor counter. This combination of industrial output, doctrinal innovation, and individual skill made the bar a transformative weapon of World War II, highlighting a stark contrast between Japanese and American approaches to infantry combat. Where Japanese doctrine relied on courage and massed human waves, American forces leveraged sustained automatic fire to control the battlefield, redefining the concept of small unit firepower. During the early stages of the Pacific Campaign, every U.S. Army squad was equipped with at least one automatic weapon. This meant that even the smallest American units had immediate access to significant firepower without needing to wait for dedicated machine gun teams to arrive or set up. On August 7, 1942, American forces launched their first major offensive of the Pacific War on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. This engagement offered Japanese defenders a first-hand view of the formidable firepower they would face in the months to come. One of the initial clashes at the Elu River, sometimes called the Battle of Tenaru on August 21, highlighted the lethal effectiveness of American automatic weapons and foreshadowed the pattern of combat in the Pacific Theater. Colonel Kona Ichiki led a force of exactly 917 men in a nighttime assault against Marine positions. The Japanese troops anticipated that close-quarters combat would favor their fighting spirit and hand-to-hand skill. However, they encountered a disciplined network of interlocking fields of automatic fire, including multiple Browning automatic rifles, strategically deployed along the Marine lines. Private First Class Albert Schmidt, manning one of these BARs, became widely recognized for his role that night. Yet, the decisive factor was not a single soldier's action, but the cumulative effect of all the automatic weapons in play. The 12 BARs within the rifle companies delivered controlled bursts, with gunners firing 6 rounds per burst, approximately a 1-second salvo, then immediately changing position. Japanese attackers advancing toward the flashes of gunfire frequently found only empty ground upon arrival. The assault ended in disaster. Out of 917 men, only 128 survived. The mathematics of the engagement illustrate the imbalance clearly. A typical Japanese rifle squad, armed with 13 bolt-action Arisaka rifles, could theoretically fire about 65 aimed rounds per minute. By contrast, a Marine squad equipped with 3 BARs could unleash 150 rounds in just the first 4 seconds of contact, long before Japanese soldiers could cycle their bolts for a follow-up shot. Confronted with this overwhelming firepower, Japanese tactics began to shift. By late 1943, defending troops increasingly relied on extensive underground positions. These were not simple dugouts. They were complex cave networks with multiple chambers and connecting tunnels designed to maximize defensive fire. Japanese doctrine considered such positions nearly impregnable, requiring either heavy artillery bombardment or direct assault to neutralize. The introduction of the BAR forced a re-evaluation of this defensive strategy. On November 22, 1943, during the Battle of Tarawa, Marines confronted the first examples of these sophisticated cave defenses. This experience led to the development of a standardized method for neutralizing them. Approach the cave at an oblique angle, position a BAR gunner roughly 25 yards from the entrance, and unleash a full magazine into the opening in a continuous figure-8 sweep. The principle was straightforward, yet the consequences were devastating. Controlled, sustained automatic fire could suppress defenders inside complex cave systems, demonstrating how portable automatic weapons had fundamentally altered both offensive and defensive tactics in the Pacific Theater. The .36 cartridge discharged from the Browning automatic rifle retained lethal velocity even after multiple bounces off hard surfaces in confined environments. A single burst fired into a cave entrance could rapidly turn the entire interior into a chaotic zone of ricocheting rounds. Marines quickly observed that discharging a 20-round magazine into such spaces produced what they described as a hornet's nest phenomenon, with bullets careening unpredictably off walls, ceilings, and floors, rendering survival virtually impossible. Japanese soldiers trained to defend these positions to the last man often met death before they even glimpsed their attackers. On June 15, 1944, during the Battle of Saipan in the Mariana Islands, Japanese forces had fortified their positions with meticulous care, drawing lessons from previous encounters at Tarawa and Kwajalein. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito commanded roughly 31,000 troops, occupying positions deemed virtually impenetrable. The defenders had studied USS tactics in depth and prepared for conventional assaults, but they were unprepared for the overwhelming volume of automatic firepower the Marines would bring. By the time of Saipan, Marine doctrine had undergone significant changes to fully exploit the capabilities of the BAR. Infantry companies were reorganized around BAR teams, aiming for a standard ratio of 1 BAR per 4 Marines. In practice, many units managed to deploy additional rifles, with some squads operating 5 or 6 BARs simultaneously, effectively transforming ordinary infantry groups into mobile platforms of sustained automatic fire. The effectiveness of these tactics was starkly demonstrated during the assault on Purple Heart Ridge. Japanese defenders had constructed mutually supporting positions within coral limestone caves, designed to be impervious to flanking maneuvers. Marine Private First Class Harold Agam, although not primarily assigned as a BAR operator, earned the Medal of Honor for evacuating 45 wounded comrades under heavy fire, exemplifying the courage that allowed BAR teams to maintain their fire positions and continue suppressive operations. The scale of Marine firepower on Saipan was extraordinary. The 2nd Marine Division alone expended approximately 8.7 million rounds of 20,006A ammunition over the course of 3 weeks, primarily through BARs and machine guns. The Japanese defenders, hoping to leverage spiritual resolve and prepared defenses to offset numerical disadvantage, faced an unyielding reality. American industrial capacity could produce far more ammunition than Japan could supply soldiers. Beyond the sheer lethality, the BAR inflicted profound psychological effects. Its distinctive rapid-fire cadence was immediately recognizable, different from the continuous roar of machine guns, signaling the presence of agile, close-range firepower. Veteran Marines recounted the terror induced by multiple BAR teams firing simultaneously, a rolling, almost tangible rumble of bullets that demoralized defenders even before contact. American fire discipline amplified this effect. Marine training emphasized brief, precise bursts designed to maximize hit probability while conserving ammunition. Japanese troops, anticipating disorderly, wasteful gunfire, instead encountered calculated, efficient bursts that inflicted real casualties with every salvo. By mid-1944, captured documents revealed that Japanese forces were explicitly instructed to locate and eliminate BAR operators, acknowledging the weapon's central role in U.S. small unit tactics. Yet in practice, identifying these gunners proved nearly impossible, as the weapons were constantly on the move and most squads fielded multiple automatic rifles. On February 19, 1945 at Iwo Jima, the Japanese had endured 3 years of intense exposure to American automatic weapons. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding approximately 21,000 defenders, had meticulously studied prior battles and refined his defensive approach to the utmost degree. His network of interlocking tunnels extended nearly 11 miles underground, representing the pinnacle of Japanese cave defense strategy. However, by this stage, BAR tactics had also evolved. Marines employed specialized methods honed through bitter combat experience, enabling them to neutralize even the most elaborate subterranean defenses. In these engagements, the BAR's impact was multidimensional. It delivered devastating physical losses while simultaneously eroding the enemy's confidence and morale. The combination of disciplined fire, mobility, and relentless volume turned the automatic rifle into more than just a weapon. It became a strategic instrument capable of reshaping the battlefield in ways that both mathematics and psychology favored the Marines. By the mid-1940s, the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, had transitioned from a support weapon to a central element of USC infantry tactics. During assaults, automatic riflemen advanced at the forefront, delivering suppressive fire to pin down enemy defenders while standard rifle squads maneuvered to flank positions. A weapon that had largely been defensive in World War I found a decisive offensive role in the Pacific campaigns. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone, previously celebrated for his valor on Guadalcanal, returned to the front lines only to be killed on February 19, 1945 during the initial hours of the invasion of Iwo Jima. Basilone was leading his BAR-equipped sections forward when he was struck by mortar fire. His death highlighted the brutal reality of the Pacific theater. Even the most battle-hardened veterans were vulnerable in the opening moments of a campaign. On Iwo Jima, from a garrison initially numbering around 21,000 Japanese troops, only 1,083 were taken prisoner. The overwhelming majority perished, many trapped within fortified caves under relentless American fire. Over the course of 36 days, U.S. Marines expended approximately 12 million rounds of small arms ammunition, with the 28th Marine Regiment alone firing nearly 90,000 rounds while securing Mount Suribachi in just 5 days. By the time of the Okinawa campaign on April 1, 1945, American automatic weapons had established unquestioned dominance on the battlefield. The Japanese 32nd Army, consisting of roughly 130,000 soldiers including Okinawan conscripts, had constructed elaborate defenses, incorporating every tactical lesson and adaptation they could muster. Despite these preparations, they faced not merely a highly trained Marine force, but an industrially supported military machine capable of producing automatic firearms at an unprecedented scale. By Okinawa, the U.S. had manufactured over 300,000 BARs, enabling units to operate with far more automatic firepower than official tables of organization allowed. In many instances, soldiers carried one BAR for every 2 or 3 men, understanding that survival depended on sustained firepower. The 96th Infantry Division reported deliberately exceeding their authorized BAR allocation to maximize combat effectiveness. Colonel Hiromi Yahara, a senior staff officer of the Japanese 32nd Army and one of the few high-ranking survivors, later emphasized the overwhelming material advantage of U.S. forces in his post-war writings. While his accounts do not specifically mention the BAR, the fall of the Shuri defensive line illustrated a strategic truth. Japanese fortifications were not defeated by brute force alone, but through systematic, relentless application of automatic fire. Positions were neutralized cave by cave, often with overwhelming suppressive fire. The defenders had prepared for combat grounded in resolve and spiritual discipline, but they confronted a military sustained by industrial power. The production story of the BAR is inseparable from American manufacturing capabilities. While Japanese soldiers were entombed in rock and soil, U.S. factories operated at full capacity to sustain an unprecedented war effort. IBM's plant in Poughkeepsie, New York, initially focused on typewriters and calculating machines, was converted to BAR production in 1941. By 1944, the facility had delivered 20,000 rifles, each built to exacting tolerances that exceeded the precision of Japanese hand-assembled firearms. The New England Small Arms Corporation became the principal producer, manufacturing 168,380 BARs and exemplifying America's capacity for large-scale, high-quality armament production. Marlin Rockwell, previously inexperienced in weapons manufacture, constructed new plants dedicated entirely to BAR fabrication. Even overseas, Carl Gustaf Stad's factory in Sweden licensed BAR production and reportedly explored neutral channels to supply Japan in 1943, underscoring the global recognition of the weapon's significance. Ultimately, the narrative of the BAR in the Pacific Theater demonstrates the intersection of tactical innovation and industrial might. Individual heroism, like that of Barcelona, mattered, but the decisive factor in battles such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa was sustained automatic fire enabled by an industrial machine capable of supplying tens of thousands of advanced rifles to the front lines. The BAR's prominence reflected not only tactical evolution but also the capacity of the American war economy to translate manufacturing prowess into battlefield dominance. During the war years, Japanese military representatives stationed in neutral Europe briefly explored the idea of acquiring foreign automatic weapons. In Stockholm, a Japanese military attaché examined whether overseas purchases could supplement Japan's own arms production. The investigation quickly reached a dead end. Japan simply lacked the hard currency reserves and, more critically, the merchant shipping capacity needed to transport large quantities of weapons across oceans dominated by Allied naval power. Even if contracts had been signed, delivery would have been nearly impossible. The numbers themselves exposed the deeper imbalance. American factories produced roughly 350,000 Browning automatic rifles (BARs) during the war. In comparison, Japan manufactured approximately 41,000 Type 96 and 53,000 Type 99 light machine guns combined. Even taken together, Japan's entire output of light machine guns was dwarfed by a single American weapon program. The United States produced nearly 4 times more BARs than Japan produced of all comparable light machine guns across the entire conflict. Yet, weapon count alone did not explain the gap in battlefield effectiveness. The true strength of the BAR lay in something even more decisive: ammunition supply. This aspect of American industrial warfare was fundamentally alien to Japanese strategic planning. A BAR gunner in combat typically carried 12 to 15 magazines, amounting to 240 to 300 rounds immediately on his person. Beyond that, additional magazines were distributed among other squad members to ensure constant resupply under fire. In practical terms, a single U.S. Marine rifle squad could move into battle carrying around 2,000 rounds of BAR ammunition, separate from rifle cartridges. Behind every squad stood an industrial base of staggering scale. American ammunition factories turned out tens of billions of cartridges during the war. While some wartime claims, such as the production of 21,036 rounds alone, cannot be independently verified, reliable estimates indicate that the United States manufactured approximately 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition of all types during World War II. This overwhelming production capacity meant that American forces rarely, if ever, faced ammunition shortages. They could afford to fire at volumes that appeared reckless, even wasteful, to Japanese troops who were trained to conserve every bullet. The contrast became starkly visible during the Battle of Okinawa. Over an 82-day campaign, the U.S. 10th Army expended an estimated 60 million rounds of small arms ammunition. Within that figure, the Focal 4 alone officially recorded firing 25 million rounds from rifles and machine guns. Japanese defenders operated under entirely different constraints. In many cases, individual soldiers were issued no more than 100 rounds for the duration of an entire battle. What a Japanese infantryman was expected to make last weeks, American units could expend in moments. The war in the Pacific thus became a collision between scarcity and abundance, fought not only by soldiers but by factories thousands of miles away. Behind these statistics were human lives on both sides, shaped and often destroyed by the logic of industrialized warfare. According to post-war Japanese government records, total Japanese military deaths reached approximately 2.3 million. Research by Japanese historians suggests that around 60%, roughly 1.4 million men, died not from direct combat, but from starvation and disease. The remaining combat fatalities resulted from a combination of artillery fire, aerial bombing, naval gunfire, and small arms engagements. It is impossible to isolate how many casualties were caused specifically by the BAR. No weapon leaves such a clean statistical footprint. Nevertheless, its role in establishing overwhelming American fire superiority is beyond dispute. Throughout the Pacific Theater, USI forces frequently inflicted losses at ratios exceeding 10-1, not because they outnumbered their opponents, but because they outgunned them. By mid-1944, this firepower advantage had been refined into doctrine. U.S. Marine units developed standardized procedures for clearing Japanese cave defenses, procedures designed explicitly to exploit the strengths of the BAR. Tactical manuals shaped by hard-earned experience from Tarawa through Saipan outlined a precise method. The bar gunner was positioned at an oblique angle to the cave entrance, typically maintaining a distance of around 25 yards. A full magazine would be fired in a controlled sweep to saturate the interior. White phosphorus grenades were then used to mark cleared positions, while continuous automatic fire suppressed any remaining resistance during the infantry advance. Repeated thousands of times across island battlefields, this method transformed cave fighting from chaotic, close-quarters struggles into a grimly systematic process. Japanese defenses, originally engineered to funnel attackers into lethal killing zones, became traps for their own occupants. Inside confined caves, BAR rounds ricocheted unpredictably, turning defensive shelters into enclosed chambers of destruction. The imbalance between American and Japanese automatic weapons extended beyond sheer numbers. It was also a matter of quality. The BAR embodied decades of industrial experimentation, precision engineering, and larger-scale standardization. Japan's closest equivalents, the Type 96 and Type 99, were heavier weapons that required two-man crews and weighed approximately 19.2 kilograms and 21.6 kilograms respectively when equipped with bipods. Even then, they suffered from inconsistent manufacturing quality. Japanese arms production relied heavily on dispersed workshops and skilled craftsmanship rather than true mass production. While this approach worked for certain weapons, it struggled to meet the tight tolerances demanded by reliable automatic firearms. Springs weakened prematurely, extractors fractured, and feed systems jammed under combat conditions. At a deeper level, the limitations of Japanese metallurgy revealed the broader story. An industrial system stretched beyond its limits in a war decided by machines as much as by men. Browning automatic rifle barrels were constructed from chrome molybdenum steel, a material that maintained structural integrity under prolonged firing, preventing deformation even during sustained volleys. In contrast, Japanese firearms relied on lower-quality steel that demanded meticulous heat treatment by highly skilled artisans, a process that could not be efficiently expanded for mass production. The United States' ability to mass-produce firearms not only ensured quantity but also often resulted in more reliable weapons than the labor-intensive, craft-oriented Japanese approach. This shift effectively moved the emphasis in infantry combat from individual marksmanship to coordinated application of automatic firepower. Japanese soldiers, trained extensively in precise aiming and disciplined shooting, quickly realized that American troops approached engagement differently. BAR operators did not rely on deliberate sighting in the traditional sense. They employed a method of walking fire onto targets, continuously adjusting based on where bullets struck. Such a technique was impossible with bolt-action rifles and fundamentally undermined Japanese infantry tactics that emphasized stealth, camouflage, and deliberate positioning. A single BAR gunner could sweep an entire slope with one magazine, forcing concealed Japanese troops either to reveal themselves or remain exposed to lethal fire. The concept of saturating an area with fire rather than achieving individual precision represented a major doctrinal shift that Japanese forces struggled to counter. The effectiveness of the BAR was inseparable from American logistical prowess. Every weapon deployed in combat was supported by a vast network extending from factories in the United States through freight trains and cargo ships. The scale of this operation was almost unimaginable from a Japanese perspective. A single Marine regiment could consume roughly 40,000 rounds of small arms ammunition per week, necessitating dedicated supply vessels, shore crews, ammunition carriers, and pre-positioned stockpiles. Japanese planners, expecting the Americans to exhaust their resources after initial assaults, were consistently surprised as USS firepower continued to escalate. Ulithi Atoll serves as a prime example. In 1944, an entirely new supply base was constructed to support Pacific operations. Logistics units there managed enormous quantities of ammunition on a daily basis, while transport ships conducted continuous voyages from West Coast manufacturing centers to forward bases. The infrastructure required ports, cranes, storage facilities, and specialized handling equipment represented an investment far beyond the entirety of Japan's military budget. The bear thus symbolized not only a technological advantage but also a fundamentally different approach to warfare. Cultural factors also shaped the contrast between Japanese and American combat styles. Japanese military tradition, steeped in the samurai ethos, emphasized individual valor, personal honor, and spiritual connection with one's weapon. Firearms were treated almost as sacred artifacts, maintained with extreme care and reverence. By comparison, American forces viewed weapons as functional tools designed to be reliable, replaceable, and, if necessary, expendable. When a bar malfunctioned, a Marine could immediately draw another from supply. A Japanese soldier with a damaged rifle often faced the fatal choice of attempting field repairs under fire. Training for the BAR reflected an industrial mindset applied to military education. At facilities such as Camp Pendleton and Fort Benning, Marines were taught through repetitive drills, standardized procedures, and assembly line-style instruction. Each Marine fired more rounds in practice than many Japanese soldiers would see throughout their entire military service. This combination of superior materials, mass production, logistical depth, and industrialized training fundamentally redefined infantry combat in the Pacific Theater, granting American forces a sustained tactical and operational advantage that Japanese doctrine could not match. During World War II, the standard training program for Marines using the Browning automatic rifle BAR was exceptionally rigorous. Each Marine was required to discharge at least 2,000 rounds across a variety of drills designed to develop both accuracy and instinctive responsiveness. Trainees practiced moving and shooting simultaneously, coordinating their fire between two weapons, conducting rapid magazine swaps, and maintaining control under high-stress scenarios. By the time of graduation, a Marine could replace a magazine in under 3 seconds, resolve stoppages in the field, and sustain precise fire while on the move. Achieving this level of proficiency demanded not only thousands of rounds per individual but also hundreds of hours of dedicated instruction, a logistical and industrial commitment only possible through the massive American manufacturing system. In contrast, Japanese forces, constrained by chronic ammunition shortages, could rarely provide even a fraction of this training, with many soldiers entering combat having fired fewer than 100 rounds during their entire preparation. The battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa in the final months of the Pacific Campaign starkly highlighted the overwhelming advantage that American automatic weapons conferred. Despite the Japanese defenders' preparation and intimate knowledge of the terrain, they faced an unassailable reality. They were confronting not just an army, but the output of an industrial machine. On Iwo Jima alone, US Marines expended roughly 12 million rounds over 36 days. Okinawa saw even higher figures, with an estimated 60 million rounds fired in 82 days, including 25 million documented by the VTI Fight Corps alone. Most of this ammunition was delivered through automatic rifles and similar weapons. Japanese troops, already depleted and deprived of adequate food and water, endured relentless, unbroken fire, trapped in positions from which movement or counterattack was nearly impossible, facing near certain death. Analysis of these engagements demonstrates a fundamental lesson about modern industrialized warfare. Sheer volume of fire produced and delivered by industrialized systems can decisively outweigh individual valor or tactical ingenuity. Each Japanese defender faced firepower equivalent to what an entire rifle company would have generated in traditional engagements. Yet these bullets were produced and distributed on a scale unmatchable by any pre-industrial army. While the atomic bombs that concluded the war have often overshadowed the conflict's conventional firepower, the reality is that weapons like the BAR had already made Japan's defeat inevitable. Conventional arms had inflicted far more casualties across the Pacific than the atomic strikes would eventually cause. Even Japan's military leadership recognized this disparity. Admiral Suimu Toyota, serving as Navy Chief of Staff, noted in the final imperial conferences that America's conventional firepower alone guaranteed eventual Japanese surrender. The atomic bombings hastened the conclusion, but they did not fundamentally alter the balance. Japan simply could not compete with American industrial output of weapons and ammunition. Post-war studies by Japanese officers who visited the United States revealed the astonishing scale of American production. Records indicate that roughly 350,000 BARs were manufactured during the conflict, nearly 4 times the total production of all Japanese light machine guns combined. Each BAR cost about $75 to produce in 1944, whereas Japanese Type 96 machine guns required more resources and labor yet provided inferior performance. Industrial inspections in the 1950 seconds further illuminated the American advantage. Assembly lines, standardized components, rigorous quality control, and other mass production innovations enabled the U.S. to equip its forces with superior weapons in unprecedented numbers. Japan, in contrast, struggled to handcraft small quantities of less effective alternatives. Historians of military technology have concluded that the BAR and similar automatic weapons rendered traditional Japanese resistance strategies largely futile. These weapons revealed a harsh truth about modern combat: industrial capacity and production efficiency outweigh sheer courage or tactical skill. In the context of total war, a nation's ability to produce, distribute, and sustain firepower decisively determines battlefield outcomes, demonstrating that even the most determined defenders are powerless against the relentless output of a mechanized industrial war machine. Dr. Edward Dreer, a noted historian specializing in the Pacific theater, argued that the introduction of American automatic firearms fundamentally reshaped the dynamics of infantry engagements in the Pacific Islands. Unlike conventional tactical challenges, the Japanese failure to develop an effective response was rooted not in strategy but in industrial capability. They were confronted with an adversary capable of outfitting every small unit with automatic firepower, maintaining an endless flow of ammunition, and rapidly replacing casualties without pause. The numerical evidence underscores this disparity. Across the entirety of the Pacific conflict, Japanese forces inflicted roughly 11,100 American fatalities from all causes, while suffering an estimated 2.3 million deaths themselves, a staggering ratio. While multiple elements contributed to this imbalance, the technological and production advantages of American automatic weaponry were undeniably central. The influence of the Browning automatic rifle (BAR) extended beyond the battlefield, leaving a profound imprint on Japanese society in the post-war period. The very instrument that dismantled Japanese militarism also served as a tangible example of the power inherent in an industrialized democracy. In the aftermath of defeat, Japan embraced principles reflected in the design and deployment of these weapons: systematic efficiency, technological sophistication, and mastery of large-scale production. Veterans returning to civilian life played a pivotal role in translating these observations into industrial innovation. Companies such as Honda, Toyota, and Sony, founded in the post-war years by individuals who had witnessed American production might firsthand, integrated lessons derived from this exposure. They recognized that true national influence stemmed less from military conquests than from the capacity to produce goods efficiently and innovatively on a national scale. The extraordinary economic recovery of Japan, the so-called economic miracle, was in part informed by these insights gleaned from observing industrialized warfare. In the 1950 seconds, the newly re-established Japanese self-defense forces benefited from direct American military assistance, receiving modern firearms including approximately 10,000 BARs as part of aid programs. Soldiers trained with the very systems that had previously overpowered Japanese troops, reflecting an ironic transformation from a militaristic society to one aligned with the ideals of industrial democracy. In subsequent decades, veterans from both nations occasionally returned to former battlefields across the Pacific to participate in reconciliation ceremonies. At these events, Americans who had served as BAR gunners and surviving Japanese infantry shared candid reflections on their combat experiences. These dialogues revealed a mutual acknowledgement. Neither side was fully in control of the broader forces shaping their fates. American Marines had functioned as conduits of industrialized power, while Japanese soldiers had operated within a system rooted in rigid military hierarchy and feudal discipline. The clash of these fundamentally different systems had produced immense human tragedy but also catalyzed profound societal transformation. One such gathering, held in 1995 on the island of Eniwetok to mark the 50th anniversary of a pivotal engagement, saw American and Japanese veterans jointly place wreaths at memorials. They collectively recognized that the firearms which had caused immense loss of life had simultaneously hastened the conclusion of the conflict and contributed to Japan's societal metamorphosis. In this light, the BAR was both a tool of destruction and, paradoxically, a mechanism that helped liberate a nation from its militaristic legacy. The scale of this industrialized advantage is clear in production figures. Approximately 350,000 bears were manufactured by the United States, while Japan produced only around 41,000 Type 96 light machine guns and 53,000 Type 99 light machine guns, yielding an American production superiority ratio of roughly 3.7 to 1. In combat, these disparities translated directly into overwhelming battlefield effectiveness. In sum, the combination of technological innovation, mass production, and strategic application of automatic weapons not only determined the course of individual battles but also reshaped the trajectory of a defeated nation, illustrating the transformative power of industrialized warfare. During the Pacific campaigns, the scale of ammunition expenditure starkly illustrated the imbalance of industrial capacity between the United States and Japan. At Tarawa, U.S. forces discharged 3 million rounds over the course of just 76 hours. On Saipan, the figure rose to 15 million rounds across 3 weeks. At Eniwetok, 12 million rounds were fired in 36 days, and during the Okinawa campaign, nearly 60 million rounds were expended in 82 days. These staggering numbers highlight a broader strategic reality. In the Pacific theater, Japanese forces suffered casualty ratios of roughly 20 to 1 compared to American losses. Japanese military fatalities reached approximately 2.3 million, including 1.4 million deaths, around 60% resulting from starvation and disease. Combat-related deaths, encompassing all causes of battlefield attrition, totaled around 900,000. These figures reveal a profound asymmetry that sheer bravery could not bridge. Even when U.S. troops faced numerically superior Japanese automatic weapons, American forces could absorb heavier losses while still maintaining decisive firepower advantage. The volume of ammunition, the number of fully equipped squads, and the logistics that supported them ensured that every U.S. unit could deliver far more sustained and distributed fire than Japanese forces could match. The widespread deployment of portable automatic weapons, particularly the Browning automatic rifle (BAR), forced a re-evaluation of infantry tactics that reverberated far beyond the Pacific. The conflict demonstrated that equipping individual squads with automatic weapons offered more tactical effectiveness than relying on static machine gun emplacements. Observers around the world quickly noted these lessons. The Soviet Union, studying American performance, accelerated the development of assault rifles, directly leading to the creation of the AK-47, a weapon explicitly intended to provide each soldier with automatic fire capability. Similarly, China, analyzing Japan's defeats, reorganized its forces around automatic small arms, and even Japan's post-war self-defense forces based their infantry doctrine on the same principle. In essence, the Pacific War marked a transition in the nature of combat, from reliance on individual skill and heroic marksmanship to an emphasis on massed, industrially produced firepower. Success in modern warfare increasingly depended on the ability to manufacture, supply, and sustain weapons on a massive scale rather than purely on courage or tactical genius. The bar exemplified this shift, serving as a tool through which the United States converted industrial capacity into battlefield dominance, its effect written in the staggering losses suffered by Japanese troops. Japanese commanders who survived the war, including General Tomoyuki Yamashita, who oversaw both extraordinary victories and catastrophic defeats from Singapore to the Philippines, came to understand the fundamental misreading of modern conflict that had contributed to Japan's collapse. Yamashita, executed for war crimes in 1946, recognized that Japanese forces had underestimated not only American firepower but the entire system behind it: industrial mobilization, logistical organization, and the integration of training with technological production. Captain Mitsuo Fuchida, leader of the Pearl Harbor strike who later became a Christian evangelist, echoed this observation. He concluded that the bar and similar weapons were emblematic not of individual American superiority but of a societal capacity to transform industry into combat effectiveness. Every weapon represented the output of factories, logistics networks, and institutional training, a collective force multiplier that individual heroism could not overcome. Japan, steeped in warrior tradition, had brought its cultural values to a conflict fundamentally defined by industrial might, and the consequences were tragically predictable. The Pacific War thus underscored a crucial principle for the modern era. Victory increasingly depended not on singular acts of valor, but on the systematic, scalable application of industrial power to warfare. The lessons learned from the BAR and its deployment reshaped military thought worldwide, signaling the rise of a new paradigm in which production capacity and strategic distribution of firepower became as decisive as strategy or courage. In museums dedicated to military history throughout Japan today, American firearms from the Second World War are exhibited as artifacts of the past. Among these, the Browning automatic rifle, BAR, frequently appears, highlighted for its role in the Pacific Theater. Japanese visitors, particularly younger generations, examine these weapons not for nostalgia but to comprehend how their nation's militaristic ambitions were decisively overcome by the industrial might of a modern democracy. The underlying lesson is unmistakable. In contemporary warfare, national power derives less from the valor of individual soldiers than from the capacity of a nation's factories, less from a willingness to sacrifice life than from the ability to produce weapons efficiently. For Japanese troops during the war, these lessons were learned at the highest cost. Combat against US forces, armed with automatic weapons like the BAR, provided a brutal, practical education, one in which every tactical failure was paid for in blood. The post-war transformation of Japan from an expansionist empire into a pacifist economic power was influenced in part by this harsh schooling. The BAR did not merely take lives, it demonstrated to an entire military tradition that industrial production rather than spiritual determination or martial code was the decisive factor in modern conflict. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima, who led the Japanese 32nd Army on Okinawa, faced this reality directly. By late June 1945, the battle's outcome was beyond doubt. On June 2020, recognizing the futility of continued resistance, Ushijima ended his life in a ritual suicide, joined by his chief of staff. His final instructions to his soldiers acknowledged the impossibility of overcoming the material superiority of the American forces arrayed against them. Ushijima's death signaled the collapse of organized Japanese resistance in the Pacific. The Americans had overwhelming advantages in every sphere: artillery, air power, naval fire support, and automatic small arms. The BAR, though only one element of this arsenal, symbolized the broader industrial and technological edge that rendered Japanese defeat inevitable. Today, the entrances to the caves on the Pacific Islands, still marked by bullet scars, serve as silent witnesses to the clash of two fundamentally different approaches to warfare. Within these marks lies the narrative of how the shift from individual combat to industrialized war played out in real time on the battlefield. The sound of BAR fire was more than a signal of tactical success. It was the voice of industrialized warfare asserting itself over centuries-old concepts of honor and personal valor. Japanese soldiers, often dying in concealed bunkers and caves under the relentless hail of bullets they could neither see nor escape, experienced firsthand the lethal efficiency of mass-produced weaponry. Each burst of fire reinforced the notion that the mechanics of industry now determined the outcome of nations' conflicts more than the bravery of their soldiers. In this sense, the legacy of the BAR in the Pacific extends beyond battlefield victories. It was a vector of transformation, reshaping Japanese understanding of power, strategy, and national priorities. The rifle's influence on the Japanese military consciousness made clear that aggression against a technologically and industrially advanced nation was not merely risky, it was doomed to fail. These lessons, painfully imparted across countless islands from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, laid the groundwork for Japan's post-war pacifism and eventual emergence as a leading economic power in Asia. The narrative of the BAR in the Pacific thus exemplifies the broader shift in modern warfare. Industrial capacity overrides individual heroism, mass production surpasses personal bravery, and the might of factories dictates the outcome more than battlefield tradition. The bullet-riddled caves of the Pacific Islands stand as enduring reminders of this transformation. Soldiers who believed that courage alone could secure victory found that belief tragically insufficient. From their sacrifice arose a new Japan, one that recognized true national strength resides not in conquest but in production, not in warrior heritage but in innovation, not in readiness to die but in the ability to create. In this unambiguous lesson, delivered with the unrelenting force of the Browning automatic rifle, the dynamics of modern war were etched indelibly in history.